hope, right? That's kind of even more of those embedded ideologies of hope in every aspect of the book. Everything I think we keep touching on, it has that embedded hope in there that, don't give up,
Mhm.
keep going forward, do the best that you can.
I taught high school honors AP classes, and when I was reading this book, I could not help but think, okay, how do you merge this modern YA, very controversial? I think it's controversial just because of the language mainly, would be a barrier for parents. But I thought that it would pair so beautifully with To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know, have you guys read that book?
Hmm.
Yes.
And I was thinking about Maverick's words where he says, sometimes you just have to do the right thing and you know that you're not going to win, but you just have to follow through and make sure you're doing the right thing. And I was looking through To Kill a Mockingbird. I used to teach that, and I was thinking about Atticus and how he tells Scout that I wanted you to see what real courage is instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. And I thought, like, just to encourage just these high school English teachers or even history teachers, that they feel this pressure to, they have to read these certain books for that to pass those tests. But that I think this book would pair so well with that, to really hone in on those thematic connections. Um, there's a lot of bucking when it comes to modern literature. High
Mhm.
school English teachers can be very snobby and feel like I can't sacrifice the classics for um, The Hate U Give. But if it were, I can just see it in a literature circle. Like, how awesome would that be to like pair these things with classics that are so um, just timeless?
Yeah, I
So
could
I
see
Yeah.
little
just like that.
excerpts.
Yeah, just
Mhm.
how do you guys see it as librarians encouraging teachers to include a book like this into their classroom, and how would they do that?
I think what, like Miranda just said, excerpts from this novel, where you pick the most important parts, where it's really giving that message of hope or tying it into the classics and seeing kind of how they align even so many years later, and tying it
Mhm.
to more relevant social, issues that are happening in the world. Like, I think the kids, if they knew what this book was about, would really, that's what interested me. Once I figured out what it was about, I was like, oh my gosh. And it really shifted my perspective, when I look back to what happened in 2020. I mean, it was a nationwide event. Like, every news media covered it, like everyone in the world heard about it. And so, if we could give the kids a different perspective and a different lens to look at something like that, a lot of them watch the mainstream media, or they heard their parents or their aunts or uncles or their friends talking about it. And so they have this mindset. And to, read a book where someone took it and made it this hopeful thing where we could learn from it, and this community came together and they stood together in the face of adversity and oppression. And, so to teach the kids that, I just think would be so powerful. But to show, the teachers, yeah, there is some stuff it's controversial, but it's going to get our kids talking, and it's going to get them thinking outside the box in a way that they may not have otherwise.
Mhm.
At my level, at the time of George Floyd, was fifth and sixth grade, and I was able to teach a social studies and ELA block together, and I love showing CNN 10 with my kids because it is fully appropriate for children at 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. It is unbiased news. But as soon as election things started happening, the district said, you're not allowed to show this any longer. It is banned, it is barred, you may not do so. And I really hated that because that stopped us having conversations in the classroom about
Mhm.
current topics that are happening in our world because kids really do want to know what's going on. Um, and I am unsure of how
Hmm.
to, like, the hate you give isn't appropriate for my grade level where at my school where I'm a librarian, but I do think it is super important for high school. But I can't even imagine, and Ashley, you'd probably be better to ask this, how you could have a text like this approved even for a high school curriculum because of how the language and adult content in the book.
Yeah, I was talking to my mother-in-law about the book, and she was listing things that, you know, she's in her 60s, and so she said they read the Catcher in the Rye when she was a young, and I was like, really? So she said, you know, there's always been the controversial. So I think, like, if you could write a rationale for it, you could get parent approval for it. I think it's about giving students choice and giving parents choice. I think that's what they really want, is just to have a say. And you know, had my kids read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. You know, and he talks about porn and things like that. And I just had parent approval, and those boys loved that book. And so I don't know, I guess I see it in that way.
I think going back to the fact that we think the canon, I would love to sit in my room and teach The Great Gatsby. I teach junior high, but go to high school. I don't want to teach high school, but go to high school and teach The Great Gatsby, and teach even in like middle school, Maniac McGee or The Watson Go to Birmingham, all these books that I grew up reading because I had to for school or otherwise. And I still recommend these books to my students, and they end up loving it just like everyone before them. But we are so stuck in the mindset that it's Fahrenheit 451 and we have to read 1984. In reality, those books are horrible with content, and they are just as horrible or controversial.
You read them in junior high?
Do what?
They read
No,
them
we
in
don't. But I mean, I just mean overall, like the school system. Those books are filled with things that are controversial, but because they're a classic book, they're obviously okay. The Hate U Give, I loved how you connected it to Kill a Mockingbird, because there's so many parallels. But this book, I just so happen to have it in front of me because I'm that cool. But The Hate U Give would get all of those points across in a way that students can understand. Because most students, if you give them To Kill a Mockingbird, and I love it, don't get me wrong, I have the graphic novel version of it, they're not going to understand it, or it's going to be so 2D for them, which it is for most high schoolers until it's further explained. Whereas The Hate U Give, you can give it to them, and they're not, while yes, there's deeper discussions that will further their understanding, they're not going to need all that explanation that any student with The Great Gatsby or Fahrenheit 451 is going to need. There's this level of understanding they're automatically going to get because it is up to date with things that are very much so going in their society.
Yeah, but it's kind of like you were saying, Tupac, they say he was outdated and he wasn't relevant, and To Kill a Mockingbird seems outdated. But yet when we pair it with The Hate U Give, we see that it is truly relevant.
Exactly.
You know, Harper Lee wrote that as a love story, which kind of makes me think of this book. You know, she's writing it as a book of hope. So I don't know. I think, and they, you know, the AP test requires them to read certain books in the canon because they have to write an essay on one of them. They don't know which book they're going to get. And so that's kind of the pressure to include those books. But yet we want kids to love to read, you know, we want them to not just read for school.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that unless you have any pressing issues, we can conclude our book meeting for today. Do you guys have anything else you want to share?
No, I think we got it.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish we taught the curriculum about the murder of many, many people in our society, specifically by police brutality. I wish there was like a class that was part of our curriculum, or even a unit as part of our curriculum to cover that. Hopefully we're moving in that direction soon. And I appreciate your time, guys.
So are you going to email us the link to the video?